I'm very, very happy to welcome Gareth Bowers from Silicon Overdrive. I know the Azubi family has really grown, and there may be members of the Azubi family here who do not know Terence Chibire. So I'll take the opportunity to introduce myself. Then I think I'll hand over to Michelle to also introduce herself, as well as the team from Silicon. And we will not waste any more time. We will just allow Gareth to take charge of the proceedings. I am Terence Chibire, and I'm the lead for our partnership with AWS where training is concerned. So I'm the lead for the AWS training partnership that we have with AWS. On the call, Gareth, we have our learners, and they're spread all over. We have quite a big Pan-African footprint. And I really thank you guys for making time to come for this session. And we understand some of you, Eastern Africa, it is 6 p.m. Gareth himself, I think, is seated within South African Standard Time, I think in Cape Town. We have people here in West Africa and people in Rwanda. And it's one big African family. So I think I want to call upon Michelle to introduce the Silicon team and then hand over to Gareth, and we can proceed with today's agenda. Over to you, Michelle.
Hi, I'm Michelle from Silicon Overdrive. And then on the call, we have Gareth, who will be presenting the session. He is our CEO and AWS brand ambassador.
Cool. Some claps, virtual applause for Gareth.
Thanks, Terence. Cool. Well, thanks very much, everyone. And thank you so much for making time to join. And I hope this will be of a lot of use and interest for everybody, and that you'll walk away having learned something and hopefully being a bit more inspired to learn more and work harder with Terence and Janet and Azubi. So from my side, there will also be a colleague of mine, James Sandani. James, do you want to maybe pop on your camera or say hello? Or is James shy? Okay, so what James and I will simply share a presentation deck. So at some point I will pass over to him, and James can then give some of his journey and speech. He went through Azubi last year, so he's doing the course, or done the course that most of you are starting out now. So it is very valuable for you to also understand how James has progressed, and a lot of those personal lessons from his side that he would like to share with you. Let me share screen then. Can you all see my screen?
Loaded and visible on my end.
Cool. Are we all good? Cool. Is that a yes? Perfect. Cool. So yeah, as Michelle said, I'm CEO of Silicon Overdrive. I was actually also the software director and a software developer. So I'm what you would call a builder as well as a solution architect. And so I work with the pre-sales team, which is where James works at Silicon Overdrive. And then I'm also a brand ambassador. So I wear a few hats, and I've achieved a few AWS certs along the way. So I probably can empathize or sympathize with you at a lot of where maybe your studies are starting out and where a lot of your passions and interests are. The agenda that we will be going through is just discussing cloud migration and security, looking at what and how you should be considering when you're going about building a solution and working on what you're looking to do and how to do it, so that you maybe can learn from lessons that other people have made over time. Then James will be speaking about his AWS cloud journey and a lot of the cloud journey and lessons and advice that he's picked up and learned over the last while. And then we'll both be speaking to that, as well as exam tips. And then we'll be opening it to the floor for any questions and stuff. So I think the key thing from my side from having worked with a lot of clients over the years, particularly those looking at moving to AWS, and also I run a lot of the AWS well-architected reviews, and that is really from your perspective, if you're starting out, if you've got a project, if you've got something that you're trying to build, understand what you're needing to build. Don't get caught up on too many of the fancy bells and whistles, but make sure you can really articulate it to your colleague or your friend, so that if you're trying to know exactly what is important, what do you need to do, what are you trying to achieve by phase 1 or a POC, what would you need to then do to get it to an MVP? What are you looking to accomplish in terms of reliability or performance and cost? So, if you're starting out, maybe you want to ensure that everything you're doing is using the free tier services, or that your costs are, as minimal as possible. But make sure that what you're doing is architecting it in such a way that really kind of makes sense, and that it can scale and be built out with those same things in mind. Similarly, then, how do you go about that? So one of the methods would be to consult a company or a AWS partner like ourselves, which have AWS architects and stuff, or do a lot of the studies, particularly around the solution architect, understand more about the concepts and the philosophies. That's what it's trying to teach you, rather than specific questions or things like that. Understand the paradigms and the things behind it, and also be aware that there are a lot of reference architectures on the internet. And also, if you do work with a lot of solution architects, they will often provide you reference architectures. So for instance, if you're wanting to create a serverless environment and you're wanting to use Lambda and API gateway, there might be certain ways of doing that securely, where you can simply look for a couple of reference architectures online and see which one works for you. Maybe if you're doing an LMS and you want to use a Moodle or a WordPress or something like that, again, understand, are you wanting to create that as a single VM? Is it to be used by a company where maybe they don't need to auto scale? Or is it something which, maybe you're going to market, creating an e-commerce site, and you're actually expecting, in 6 months' time, maybe 10,000 users, 50,000 users, in which case you do need to make sure that what you're building is going to be scalable and able to work. There's a very big difference in terms of your priorities if you're building something for an internal use at a company versus possibly going to market with a large user base. And similarly, it's also, there could be different considerations you might want to look at if you're going B2C versus B2B. Again, there might be certain different ways of trying to do it. So really, don't be shy about reading up, researching it, maybe asking other people, or seeing even what competitors are doing. Even if it's not on AWS, a lot of the other hyperscalers would have very similar concepts and similar architectures. The names of the services might be different, but the cloud concepts is what is vastly different to what you might find of spinning up a single VM on a local ISP or on a normal sort of hosting provider. The way of being able to break down your architecture and decouple a lot of those components so that you can really kind of view the metrics better and simpler really is where the hyperscalers and AWS kind of help you really get a lot more insight into your workload, and also be able to achieve phenomenal things like scaling and protection. Similarly then, allow time for experimentation, research and development. Whether you're the builder or you're working with a developer who's doing it, make sure that in your time frame that you are allowing time for experimentation. But I often see that people come to AWS and they build what they're comfortable with or what they know, and they simply are plopping it on in a VM kind of construct, and it's not always that simple. Sometimes you might find that certain things could achieve much better cost savings if they were done using a different tool, which maybe the person wasn't familiar with, or maybe there's slightly better ways of doing it. And it's often a bit of a chicken and egg. You don't want to spend too on certain things and getting to an analysis paralysis kind of scenario. You want to be moving forward. You've obviously got deadlines and budgets and things like that, but you also don't want to find halfway through your development build that suddenly something is too slow or it's too clunky or there's an issue, and maybe a AWS managed service or something else, or maybe using parts of your cron jobs or scheduled tasks in serverless would take off that load. Maybe let me give you an example. Let's say you're building a website that maybe does, say, property management or payroll, and every time towards the end of the month, around the 25th, 28th, you maybe have a process that goes in for every one of your owners or your clients will generate a PDF and send them off a report, and you schedule that for 8 in the morning or whatever that is. And maybe you then find it works great for 100 users, 500 users. Maybe when you get to 5,000, your server suddenly clogs and it takes 2 hours to send out, and users using that website are complain that the site is slow and unresponsive. So maybe you needed to move that task off to a separate EC2, or have some other way of separating out the task and kind of architecting it so that you're aware of what it's doing, so that you can rather use those sort of services. Another example might be if, for argument's sake, you've got a site that maybe takes payments at a sudden spike. Like, let's say you're writing something that handles an event thing. So maybe you've got a sports event or something like that, and suddenly you open up sales at 9 in the morning. You might suddenly find that your site can't handle 20,000 people coming to the site in 1 minute. Auto scaling takes too long to kick up the second server. You need to find a way of either queuing those responses or having a way of dealing with those sort of things. That's the sort of thing where you really want to ensure that you've considered how your architecture is going to grow as your user base will grow, and is it going to work? And if you're not sure, possibly look at things like load testing or ways to simulate traffic to really kind of get a sense of it, so that you get a better sense of how your workload will respond to it, rather than waiting till you're so big and getting so many users that they then get a bad experience and complain. So rather take that sort of stress away from the ops side of things and make it more part of the development process early on, if that's where your workload is going to go. And then always build securely. It's another thing that I often see is people don't necessarily make enough time in terms of understanding how security can be implemented in the cloud or AWS. So a lot of the time, again, people might just simply spin up a single server, put lots of things in it, and either for convenience or for whatever, they put it all in a public subnet. Maybe some of the time they aren't aware of private subnets and how that side of things works. But those sort of things that you cover in your solution architect associate really go a long way to speaking to what is possible. Then at least you with your team can then make more informed decisions around whether or not that's something you are wanting to keep simple for the moment, and then once it gets towards MVP, then look at it. Or if you want to rather do it now, put it in a private subnet, maybe you'll need a NAT instance or a load balancer in front so that you can get the traffic in and out. Those are the sort of things where the solution architect really kind of shines in terms of showcasing those scenarios, and also just explaining the trade-offs in terms of, what are you getting for it and why are you doing it and at what point should you be doing it. Avoid undifferentiated heavy lifting. So what I mean by that is, if, for instance, AWS has a service called Cognito, which does authentication and authorization. So you can just create the user pools and get your app to hook into it, and maybe it takes your developers, 5-10 hours to build it in. That could save them, 30, 50, 100 hours of possibly doing federated login or creating their own user groups and ensuring that it meets a certain level of compliance and security. Another example might be, if you're running, say, like a MySQL or a MongoDB, and you want to create a cluster because your database now needs to be secure and reliable, so you need to run it on more than one server. Doing that yourself on an EC2, setting up the synchronization is great, but it's not adding any value to the user. So that time that you're spending, setting it up, ensuring the synchronization works, ensuring that it can roll back, where is your listener, all of those sort of things, you could possibly rather move that task to using something like AWS's RDS database, which handles multi-AZ syncing automatically. And yes, it costs slightly more for running the database on that per hour than it would on the EC2, but the trade-off is your team doesn't need to spend that time developing it. Your sysadmin doesn't need to spend that time setting it up and configuring it. And if there's a problem, then rolling back, and maybe then you need to figure out where your indexes went wrong, if some of your data didn't work, all of those sort of things you would need to just be considering. That's what undifferentiated heavy lifting is really looking for, is getting the developers, particularly if you're in a POC or MVP kind of mind frame, focus on things that if you show to an investor or go to market with is going to make people go, wow, that's something that's really cool, as opposed to them spending time on stuff which maybe they can't see or just assume is happening behind the scenes either way. Be frugal. Use the smallest sizes you can when you're building it out. Don't go spin up a T3 large if you're only using the thing and testing it once or twice a day while your devs are building. You don't probably need it. Run it on the smallest size. And for the most part, when you're testing what you're building or what your dev's building, if a page response takes 4 seconds as opposed to 1 second, you don't really mind at that point. When you go to market, then obviously you can look at it and work out what the correct size is and right size it and see what is an optimal performance for a good user experience. Similarly, look at the metrics in your bill regularly, ideally daily. You don't want to be in a scenario where your developer or you are busy testing something. Maybe you're writing a Lambda function and you've written something a bit funny and it goes into some sort of an endless loop, and next morning you find that you've run up a several $1,000 bill. These things can happen. You can't think. So unless you're putting in guardrails or you're looking at the metrics or you're ensuring that everything you're running, you shut down daily when you leave, there's always the risk of those sort of things with any of the sort of cloud technologies. It's the sheer nature of how you can build things so quickly and scale when you need to in production. It also does come with that risk that you do need to be responsible and know what to look at and what is running. So again, look at things like the CloudWatch metrics, understand, is your server constantly running at less than 5%, in which case it's probably can be reduced and save you cost without impacting performance. Is your bill looking like it's consistent? Does it spike? If so, why? What is happening? What did the people do? Did things not get shut down? Really get to grips with understanding what's happening and why is it happening. Automate and script as much as possible. This again is something which is great and best practice as a startup or for a new venture or POC. You might find that you want to ensure that you've got a level of understanding of what is going to be repeated. But at that point, particularly if you're saying, hey, we're going to build this website and as we build it, it's going to take 3 months. We're going to need to keep testing it. And then we're going to need a QA and a prod environment, and we're going to need that. Look at using infrastructure as code. Look at using CloudFormation or Terraform. If you're going to have a certain set of testing that's kind of repeated through each iteration, look at maybe creating test scripts. Try and see where there's repetition on a variety of tasks and how you can improve that. Maybe you want to look at creating a CI/CD or a code deployment pipeline so that your developers don't have to always SSH onto the box and pull down an update. Maybe spend a day or two and create the code pipeline so that it can automatically get deployed from the pipeline. It's certainly something that we have seen a lot more people wanting to do over the last few years, whereas 5 years ago, hardly anybody had code pipelines, and they weren't things that the average developer kind of wanted to do. It was in the realms of the DevOps person who wasn't that common several years ago. So nowadays, there's a lot of easier ways to set things up, and developers can take advantage of a lot of those lessons learned and better documentation and easier ways of doing things. As I mentioned, understand how your traffic can spike and whether auto-scaling will or won't work for you. If you've got a standard sort of e-commerce site, it probably will work fine. If you've got an internal application for a business, it probably definitely will work fine. If you've got an e-commerce site that does a massive sale, then you might find that, if it's the time-based thing, maybe the auto-scaling won't kick in enough. But just, again, do load testing where possible and really kind of get an understanding of how your workload responds to the scenarios that you're envisaging. Again, you don't want to be doing a campaign for a client or for yourself and then find that your website falls over and people have a bad experience. It's a good way to kind of really lose customer confidence in your brand. So it's something that you really want to try and avoid and understand ahead of time so that you can put in the effort to make sure that it's going to respond as you want. Then looking at the billing and the CloudWatch and the alerts is be aware that there is a thing called guardrails and there are a way to set up billing alerts. It's not difficult. It's again one of those things that people don't spend an awful lot of time doing. And everybody, when there is an issue, suddenly wishes they had spent that extra half an hour, or asked those questions and seen. And it could be as simple as setting things in your billing alert so that you get a billing alert when, if you say, I don't want to spend more than $50 a month, send yourself an alert when you get to 50% of that, so that at least you know that if you're not halfway through the month and you're getting an alert for 50% of your spend, hey, either people are spinning stuff up more than you think, or your estimate wasn't accurate, or there's a problem and you need to look into it more carefully. Similarly, guardrails, you can put things in place so that maybe certain things can't be spun up, or only certain types or sizes, or only in certain regions, to prevent people making mistakes in the console. Again, it's really about trying to protect your team as they learn and grow with more knowledge, or yourself if you're doing it yourself in your own account. And then understand the metrics and what they're telling you. So let me give you an example. Let's say, for instance, you're working and you've got a web server and a database, and it's all on one VM, and you pop it on an EC2, and maybe let's say that it's actually quite a big thing. It's got 16 CPUs and maybe say 32 or 64 gig of RAM, but it's basically something that's just sitting there. Maybe you're helping a friend or a client or in your own company, and they basically say to you, look, we're moving it off another hosting provider, we're moving it to AWS, but sure, this thing with 16 CPU is costing quite a bit. What can we do about it? Or how can we make it more secure? How can we make it more reliable? Because effectively, we have one large server in a public subnet. It's not really secure. It's not really reliable. If something happens, all of our users fall over and can't access the site. So you could maybe go through a couple of iterations over a few days or a few weeks, depending how long you need to look at the metrics to get a better understanding of the workload. But the journey could basically be, well, maybe first off you say, well, let's just split the workload from 16 CPU, and let's drop the EC2 to 8 CPU, and move the database off that to MySQL on RDS, so that you then separate the two. And you kind of say, well, look, let's assume half the workload is for the web server and half the workload is actually on the database side. Again, you can look at the metrics, and maybe you find that the database was doing a lot more of the work, or the web server was doing more of the work. And again, that will depend on, if it's read intensive, write intensive, or kind of what exactly the application is doing. So then you look at those metrics for maybe a few days or a week or two, and you then decide, well, now what can I do? I've already moved the database into a private subnet. Maybe let me see now, and let's put in a load balancer, and let's look at bringing in a second availability zone. And now let me try and look at the metrics and see what is my CPU actually doing on that server overnight. Okay, it maybe is dropping down to 8%. Cool, it's not really being used overnight. I can probably halve the size of the CPU, because the website, if it's right-sized, can probably run happily on 4 CPU. So I'll create an auto-scaling group so that during the day, the second server spins up and it's using a combined 8 CPU, or two EC2s with 4 CPU each. But I'm only paying for that for probably 6 or 8 hours during the day when it needs that second server because the workload requires it. But again, at 5, 6, 7 in the evening, you'll probably find that that workload reduces, and you might then find that you've only got one of those EC2s running for the other 15, 16 hours a day. And maybe on Saturdays, Sundays, that's not needed. So what you'll find is instead of running 8 CPUs 24/7, you're running 8 CPUs for maybe 40, 45 hours of the week, and the other 130, 440 hours, you're paying half that amount. So suddenly you've gone from paying whatever for that size to half of that for probably 70% of the time. Then you say, well, maybe I'll take my database and put that in a multi-AZ deployment. And suddenly I've now got a load balancer distributing traffic. If for whatever reason I suddenly have a large campaign and a large sale, I now can, maybe the auto scaling group can spin up a third server. So suddenly I can actually handle a bigger load than what my original server of 16 CPU could have handled. And suddenly I'm in a place where I'm probably paying less. It can scale, so it's more responsive and therefore more reliable. It's into availability zone. So if there's ever an outage or a service problem of a type in availability zone, your RDS will naturally swap over to the other one. And chances are you should be paying less than what you were paying for the previous one. So those are sort of a lot of the considerations from the well-architected framework in terms of looking at things like reliability, performance, and cost optimization, so that you're trying to see what are you trying to build, what is your user base, and how can you build this so that it best ticks all of those boxes while still allowing you the flexibility to grow and add on features and continue to work with it. And again, the only way you're really going to understand that is to really kind of be looking at the metrics as you're building it and really get an in-depth knowledge of how that works and understand it over time. I can't really emphasize that enough. Even if you're coding in Python or PHP or whatever language, similar applications will react differently because the user base will be different and the metrics will need to be looked at for each application. It really is an individual kind of journey. Cool. Well, that's a lot of the lessons learned from my side from dealing with clients over the years, and a lot of the topics, things to consider at a high level when you start out and are looking at your solution architect course. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to James to maybe tell you some of his journey from his cloud. James? Can anybody else hear James, or is it just me?
Hello.
James.
What about now?
James comes in.
Now
you are in.
Cool, James, go for it. All yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So first and foremost, I'd like to apologize for any inconveniences. I don't have electricity at my side, so probably you won't be able to see me, but just allow me to share my screen so that I can take you through what I've prepared and we get to learn. Because electricity definitely won't stop the cloud gospel from being spread. So right about now, let me just share my screen and you can take it from there. Hello, can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can see your screen there, James.
Nice. Okay, thank you. So first, okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I'm privileged to be back to this amazing community. This is a community that has brought me up. It's a community that has made me to have a seamless transition into AWS Cloud. A community made up of my friends, mentors, and I'm really happy to be back. First, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Gareth, the CEO of Silicon Overdrive, and Ajira Kenya and Azubi Africa for giving me this opportunity. Now, to the trainees, those of you who are listening to me, I got one message for you guys. It's possible. I was in the same position a while back, graduated, and right now I got a position at Silicon Overdrive. So with the right focus, determination, and a bit of sacrifice, you'll definitely make it. And today I got a presentation of which I'm going to share a personal journey in terms of AWS Cloud and offer some tips and advice on passing the exam. So let's just get started. I will start with my cloud journey. So let me just enter the slide mode. Nice. Okay, I'll start with my cloud journey. A little history for those of you guys who don't know me quite well is that I am still a student. I'm a university student, but pursuing a bachelor's degree in telecommunication and information engineering. And one of the main things that you need to do in this degree is you must have attended at least 3 industrial attachments before graduating. Now, right now I'm in my 5th year, meaning I've already done the 2 industrial attachments. But now there's a problem in my first attachment. I really struggled to get this attachment. I moved from office to office, pleading for people to at least offer me a position to get some experience that I can present to my campus. To cut the long story short, I got the attachment, but it was totally away from what I was doing. And this made me take a step back, reflect, and think what could probably be the problem. And what I realized is that during that time, I didn't have any skills to present to these guys to give me an attachment. And so having said that, I decided to research on different technologies and find a field where I can start, at least to have a skill, so that the next time I'm looking for attachment, it won't be a hassle. Lucky for me, I had enough mentors who guided me well. And I first started with my Cisco Certified Network Associate Certificate. That was around 2021 April. I had studied for this certificate for around 6 months. And in April, I managed to do the certification. And why am I talking of CCNA? CCNA is a great certificate because one, it's like the background of cloud. At this point, you definitely know that cloud at the back end of it all are networks. Cloud is just a data center that is located far away from us. Probably the closest is in South Africa. And for us to be able to access these services, we must be connected to the internet. And this is what I learned in CCNA. It gave me a good background of getting into cloud. After doing my CCNA, I got a chance to learn about Azubi Africa, the AWS Restart program. And through guidance and mentorship, I applied for this position as a trainee at, during that time, it was AWS Restart under Ajira Kenya and Azubi. I applied for that process. Remember, I was still in school, but I didn't see that as a hurdle for me. I applied for this role. I managed to get into this training program. That was around August 2021. It was a 12 weeks program. Definitely you know about that because we're in right now. And one thing that I learned during these 12 weeks was the power of interactions. I was proactive. I interacted with my peers, mentors, and teach-ups. And out of the 12 weeks program, I managed to be the second best and got my AWS Cloud Practitioner. But that was not the main thing that I learned in this program. The major skills that I found are very essential were 1, the networking skills, 2, soft skills, 3, having what we call as self-branding, and 4, definitely the Cloud Practitioner certificate. It was a way of telling people out there that at least I know something about the cloud. And after that, that was in December after doing my Cloud Practitioner, there was another program, the engineering program. Definitely you heard of it. So I didn't stop at that point. I enrolled in this program. It was also a 12 weeks program. And this time it was intense. We learned a lot of hands-on practices. We learned a lot of Linux. We worked on projects and all that. It was intense, but through determination and focus, we managed to finish this program. That was after 12 weeks. That is in April. I'm doing my AWS Solutions Architect. And apart from that, what did I learn? Again, the same things: self-branding, soft skills, networking, and all that, you know? And that these are the skills that people don't pay much attention to what, but are skills that can make you to be outstanding. So if you're hearing me, kindly start practicing on these skills: soft skills, networking, self-branding. Okay, so that was in Azubi. And after finishing this program, I managed to get an internship at a company in Nairobi. I'm located in Kenya, Nairobi, where I got a chance to explore Microsoft Azure side. However, my heart was still in AWS Cloud, so I didn't stop stop at that point, but rather I went ahead and looked for other opportunities. And remember telling you about personal branding or self-branding. It's a very key skill that made me land a job in Silicon Overdrive. And let me just explain how it happened. So it happened in such a way that Mr. Gareth was one of my connections on LinkedIn. And I had this habit of, you know, after doing the Azubi Africa engineering program, I had this habit of looking for AWS Solutions Architect on LinkedIn, trying to message them, asking for, you know, the skills that I need to have in order for me to end up like them. So during this interaction, I'll go ahead and also ask for, you know, internship opportunities in AWS and all that. And lucky enough, when I texted Mr. Gareth, he responded immediately. I told him everything, what I was doing. I told him I had done Azubi Africa. I had the CCNA, Cloud Practitioner, and AWS Solutions Architect certificate. And just right now I was looking for a place to, you know, exercise what I've learned. And that is how I ended up in Silicon Overdrive. Yeah, so you can just say that through self-branding and the power of networking, I ended up at this role. And that's why I'm really emphasizing on these 2 skills. Awesome. Now that is a short description of my cloud journey. And now let's move on to some lessons and advice that you can definitely get out of it. Now, 1, you definitely need to have a main purpose. Okay. Definitely right now, you got a reason why you are in this program. I don't think if you are forced, you had a primary purpose, a primary reason why you wanted to join this program. Definitely to gain cloud skills. And I want you to stick on that purpose or that main purpose. Why? Because sticking to this purpose, it will definitely help you shape your direction and keep you focused on what you want to achieve in your cloud career. Things might get tough, but when you remember your main purpose, it can be all you need to get motivated and move on. 2, you need to break down your goals into smaller, achievable milestones. What do I mean? Right now you are in this program, definitely you might end up as a AWS Cloud Solutions Architect. You might end up in DevOps. You might end up as a cloud security engineer and all that. That is the main goal. But before you reach there are some small milestones that you need to achieve. Right now you are in this program, you'll definitely have to sit for that cloud practitioner, that AWS Solutions Architect. But after that, what next? Remember, you still want to be an AWS Solutions Architect. Do you think having these 2 certificates is enough? That is not enough. You need to do extra things. So you need to have a clear direction on what you want to do next before maybe ending up as a successful AWS Solutions Architect. For example, you can start with the cloud practitioner that you're in right now. Definitely, you can go ahead and learn some Linux just to reinforce what you've been learning in this program. You might want to know programming. And after that, I talked of CCNA. You might want to do a CCNA certificate and move on to do the AWS Solutions Architect and definitely move on to the professional certificate. So these are small milestones that you can have, for example. So make sure you've broken down your goals into small, achievable milestones. This helps to avoid feeling overwhelmed, definitely, and give you a sense of progress and accomplishment. I know how intensive this program is because I was also at that point. And sometimes you might feel like giving up, But if you have something as small as this, if you got your goals written down somewhere, at that point, at that lowest point, you can just look at these goals and that will be enough to motivate you to move on. And the third lesson that we can learn is have a roadmap and routine. Okay, this, especially on the routine part, this is something that can definitely help you to move forward. In case you stumble upon an obstacle and all that, if you have a routine that you follow each and every day, no matter what, whatever you need to do is just show up. If you feel like maybe there's a day you're feeling overwhelmed and all that, just show up and everything will be fine. So have a clear roadmap and routine. At this point, it's similar to the second point. In terms of roadmap, if right now gauge who you want to be, and start working towards that person. Have a clear roadmap. Have steps in term. Remember, time is something essential that you need to bear in mind. So, in terms of having this roadmap, you need to incorporate time there. Let's say the first quarter of the year, you want to do your cloud practitioner. Make sure by the second quarter. Before the second quarter is done, you're done your solutions architect. Yeah, so that's just a kind of roadmap that you can follow and a routine that you can daily also get up and follow. On to the next point is personal branding. I don't understand why I wrote personal branding as the fifth point. I mean, the fourth point. This should be, in fact, the first point. Remember, what is the main reason for you to be in this program? Definitely, you might maybe want to get that certificate. Some of us, maybe you are looking for a job opportunity and all that. But remember, out of the many people who are learning cloud, how are you going to be outstanding? It's time for you to build a personal brand if you don't have. And what do I mean by a personal brand? Right now, we have a lot of social media platforms that you can showcase to the world out there what you're doing. And one platform that I found very useful is LinkedIn. Make sure you've created a LinkedIn profile. You have a good description about yourself. Right now, you can talk of, I'm in Ajira, Kenya, I'm in Azubi, Africa, doing maybe a cloud practitioner. That is okay. Let the world know what you're doing. And always be comfortable in what you're doing, okay? And don't feel shy to post anything. If you have gone ahead and spun an EC2 instance, why can't you get to LinkedIn and create a post telling the world that, you know what? I've created this EC2 instance. These are the steps that I've followed, and I feel happy. That is enough. You know, at least try to tell the world what you're doing. You never know who is watching. Maybe Gareth is somewhere watching. So it's high time you get a personal brand if you don't have. And the next point is about proactiveness and networking, which is close to the personal branding. Proactive, be active across this social media platform. And don't stop there. Remember, you're in a program and you have your members. Talk to your members, talk to your peers, because you never know what will happen tomorrow. That peer who you don't want to talk to right now maybe might have an opportunity that can favor you tomorrow. So network and continue being proactive. And remember, proactiveness is one of your core values under Azubi Africa. Yeah, and I remember this a term that Azubi used to insist on being proactive, and I've seen the fruits of this. So make sure you're interacting with people. Make sure you're looking out for mentors. Make sure you're following people who you desire to be like them, and ask for insights. Ask for the required skills that the industries want out there. So being proactive and networking are important because they can help you find definitely new opportunities, learn from others, and establish valuable connection in the cloud community. And finally, being consistent. By consistency, this means you're working daily towards your goal, so you can build a solid foundation of knowledge and skills and establish yourself as a reliable and committed cloud enthusiast. Remember, this program is 12 weeks. There's no need for you to have struggled all the way. Right now, I think for the Kenyan cohort, it's in week 8, meaning you only have 4 weeks. There's no need for you, struggling for all the 8 weeks, and right now you want to give up. That won't make sense. Remember, there was a reason why you go to this program. Continue focusing on, continue being consistent, continue making sure that each and every day you are learning something new in the cloud that will help you tomorrow, and continue improving on that. So those are just the lessons and some advice that I can give to you guys. And over to the final part is exam tips. Now, remember, okay, at the end of this program, you are expected to sit for your cloud practitioner, and if it's the associate level, definitely AWS Solutions Architect. So how are you going to ace this exam? First, you need to understand the exam format. And in exam format, definitely you know that we will have multiple answers, questions that require multiple answers, and also questions that require single answers. And I think for AWS Cloud Practitioner, it's around 64 questions, same to AWS Solutions Architect. So just make sure you understand the exam format and also the time constraints, which will help you to have a concrete plan. 2, know the exam content domains. I know right now you definitely know what domains are, and these are the main areas that AWS are set in the exams, okay? So look at the exam content domains and look at your weak areas. Try to reinforce your weak areas by doing more research, by doing more hands-on practice, and by consulting your teach-ups. Then definitely use official AWS study materials. Right now we are in an era where we got a lot of information over the internet, and some information might be not relevant, might be outdated and all that. But for you guys, you're lucky enough to have teach-ups who are informed. Make sure you follow the study materials that your teach-ups are giving you out there for you to ace this exam. So don't be confused. One thing I know, remember there are different versions of this exam. Make sure you're studying for the latest version, okay? Then finally, definitely you need to do hands-on exercises. If your goal is to, maybe end up as an AWS Solutions Architect, as a cloud engineer, it's not all about learning what the cloud is. it also requires you to go ahead and implement what you've learned. And remember, we have AWS Management Console, we have CLI, we have SDK that we can interact with these AWS services. Make sure you get your hands dirty by doing hands-on exercise, because with this exercise, they will definitely reinforce your knowledge and what you're learning daily. So, okay. From my side, I remember during my cloud practitioner program, I was a bit hesitant on these hands-on exercises. But as I progress, I saw the importance of definitely having the hands-on exercises, and also they enable you to, they will definitely enable you to pass this exam, because if you get a question that you've definitely gone and done a lab on, you will find the answer easily compared to someone who has just read the theory part and has not implemented. So this is something that I'm emphasizing. Do hands-on exercises. Then we have a sample question. Remember before, okay, my analogy is AWS Cloud Practitioner has 65 questions. Before I went and sat for that exam, I had done 65 times 10. I had done more than 650 questions just to be familiarized with how the exam format is, how the question types are, and AWS concept. So I'm not telling you to do as those many questions, but just make sure you're comfortable enough before you sit for that exam. Okay. Then finally, during that exam, remember to manage your time effectively. If a question is hard, you can flag that question, move on to the other question, and you'll come back later. Don't waste too much time on one question. And with that, I'd like to say thank you so much, Azubi Africa. Thank you so much, Ajira Kenya, for organizing this great, session. And I'm really privileged and happy to talk to this community. And I hope you're going to have a seamless studying. And in case of anything, you can definitely reach out on LinkedIn. I will paste my LinkedIn profile so that you can connect and interact. Thank you so much, and over to you, Mr. Gareth.
Thank you so much, James, for that that personalized journey and your experience and stuff. So thanks again, and thanks very much. Terence, are we okay for time? Can I still have another 5-10 minutes?
Yes, carry on, Gareth. I think we are good.
Perfect, thanks. Cool. So I'm going to then go through those two sections as well that James covered in terms of the lessons and advice, and then also the exam tips just from my perspective, which obviously is fractionally different to James's. So from my side, and my history, I started with the developer and the solutions architect. I think I wrote those two exams within 2 months of each other, but then I took years before I did any of the other exams. So, what I can tell you is, you will find one or two of the exams that are quite intimidating or scary, where you maybe are struggling, depending if you're a developer or more things. But as James says, the more labs and practical experience you get, the easier they become, and you understand more around the process and the sort of questions and what they're looking for and the concepts and stuff. Read more and read wider, attend webinars, and go to conferences. AWS, particularly in the last 2-3 years under COVID, have had a huge amount of online webinars and things around serverless and this and that and stuff, where you really can get a lot more exposure to things that maybe you weren't aware of or didn't know was possible. That's where you really kind of learn a lot about what is possible versus not, and that kind of also gives you a lot of knowledge. So sometimes you will find on an exam or a question, one of the options is literally 2 words are different, and it might be an AWS service, and having heard of it or know what it means can mean that you can immediately eliminate that option because that's to do with this. If you've not heard of it, it kind of does always make you sit and think and introduce a bit of element of doubt. So again, the more knowledgeable you are across the range of services, particularly on the solution architect and even architect pro, does go a long way to helping you eliminate wrong answers. enjoy what you do. You know, the exams are great. They give you the certificate. They help then validate your knowledge and understanding. But follow the path where your passion is. You know, if your passion's a developer, go towards the DevOps. If you're more just kind of running the team or working with builders, then maybe solution architect allows you to talk their language and maybe make better decisions and make sure that you're understanding things and CloudWatch and those sort of things in terms of the metrics and stuff. But again, you know, from my side as an employer, you always want to have people in your team that are passionate. Again, James is doing a degree. He then decided to do Azubi on the side. He then came and worked for us whilst he was still doing other stuff and studying and still doing his degree. I mean, the guy's a machine. It's phenomenal. And, you know, all you can do is take your hat off to James and people who really kind of have that sort of a passion. Because if you don't have a passion to do that, you're not going to put in that sort of time and effort and want to reach those sort of achievements or milestones. From my side, exam tips, particularly with online learning, I very much always try and do a lot of the courses in more than one location, and I also do practice exams from more than one location. Like as James mentioned, I think he was saying that he did, you know, over 10 practice exams to get to, you know, 650 questions. I normally find I do quite a few practice exams because this might sound peculiar, I enjoy them. I find I often learn more through a practice exam and then reading up afterwards than I did from the actual course content on that module, because maybe there's more in-depth questions or scenarios or reference to things where you suddenly want to go and read up on the white paper or read up more around it, and it goes into more detail than what the online course would have. And maybe you think, yeah, the course did mention that, but you know, you will find a lot more reading and stuff things. Maybe that's more for the pro exams than for the associate level exams, or definitely probably not the cloud prac, but you will find when you get past your associates onto the pro exams that you really want to get a better sense of how much your knowledge and practical experience extends to, and how much on the pro exams do they cover that maybe you're not you know, intimately comfortable or got hands-on experience on. Similarly, as James mentioned as well, concentrate or understand your weak areas. If you can't explain why 3 of the options are wrong and why this one is the right one, then maybe you don't understand the topic well enough. So again, some of the practice exams or the sites that you can do online really do a good job of explaining the options and why some of them were wrong. I have found that more than the same question can be on multiple sites, and they sometimes will tell you, one will say it's option B, another one will say it's option C, and then you actually have to go and read up for yourself as to why there's a difference. So don't always, you know, trust some of the things or the sites and stuff. I have found, as I said, conflicts in the past when I've been looking up stuff and researching. And again, maybe get a study buddy, chat to a friend, or make sure if you're coming more from a developer background, you might find that maybe certain things like root tables or subnets or certain things are a bit of a dark art to you. Or maybe, you know, if somebody's coming more from an infrastructure background, certain things around the developer course might be just, you know, something where they're just struggling to understand, you know. So work with what you need to really kind of get a sense, but embrace it and really kind of focus on those areas where you need attention. As James said, with a routine, yeah, guys, it's important to set yourself goals or set yourself things. Otherwise, it's very easy to slack off for a week, and then that week becomes 2 weeks, and then suddenly you find that you haven't really done much after 4 weeks, and then you have to recap that module you did, and then suddenly you kind of are moving backwards, not forwards. Life happens, things do happen, but yeah, if you're trying to work towards it, stick with the routine and try and allocate a certain amount of time per day, particularly if you've got other studies or work. It certainly works for me. Again, do more practice exams than you think you need. I find that they're very useful, and I find there's a lot of value add for them. And then your journey and your exams are your own. You know, everybody wants to pass on their first attempt. Nobody really wants to say, oh, you know, I didn't pass. But again, it's all part of a life lesson. It's all part of learning. You can probably find that someone who's failed or rewritten that exam 2 or 3 times maybe understands that stuff because they put a lot more effort in for that rewrite, you know, a few weeks later than maybe what they would have done from the first one. And you'll probably find that their mark is probably considerably higher than it would have been if they'd passed on the first attempt. So don't be afraid to fail or kind of things. I sometimes see people putting off writing for months and months because they feel they're not ready. You know, it's a bit like writing code. If you want to wait for your code to be perfect, you're probably never going to put anything out there. You know, the whole point of these sort of processes is for iterative processes and stuff. So don't be afraid to fail and rewrite a few weeks later. Yes, you pay money and you obviously don't want to, and you know things, but it's not the end of the world. There's you know that you've got to focus on your journey, what you're learning, and where you're going. Other than that, that's it from my side then, guys. I believe there were some questions or things like that. Yes. Terence.
I think I've seen Ruben Kihuha. Did I see your hand? No, Rahab Kihuha. I've seen your hand up. May I give you the first opportunity?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it's actually Rahab Kihuha. So thank you so much, Gareth and James, for that wonderful presentation. So as you guys have heard, my name is Rahab Kihuha and I'm from Nairobi, Kenya. I'm currently studying with the AWS Restart program. So my first advice I would like to also give the rest of my colleagues, and just to add on top of what James has said, I think the fact that we all come maybe to AWS with different backgrounds. Like, for example, myself, I have more than 10 years experience with sales and marketing. So I just wanted to remind guys this there's a famous speech by Steve Jobs called Connecting the Dots. So you find that sometimes maybe for those who are new to IT, you may find that you feel really like, dissuaded, or you feel kind of intimidated, you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, and exams are almost coming up. So I would just like to reiterate on that point. If the speech talks about connecting the dots, everything that you have ever done in your past is going to come and help and connect that dot to the future. You don't know all the skills you've been building up, maybe communication, maybe marketing, maybe for those in our class who have law degrees, some have medical degrees. So you never know where all that information can come and be consolidated, and then you can be able to be able to help, and kind of these skills were all a way to connect the dots so that to make you better to where you are today. So everything you have ever done in your past is going to help you to be able to be where you are at 2023 at this point in time. Because for myself, I believe in a higher power, which is God. And I just believe nothing ever happens according to chance. I believe that everything was written, like it says in Jeremiah in the Bible, there's everything that has ever happened to you has a particular reason. So kind of take that and be able to kind of incorporate it, because personally myself, I'm having a great time studying cloud computing, networking with people from other countries, and just kind of, being able to understand. So I also have another question for Gareth, kindly. So we recently learned about database migration service, which enables a company to migrate on-premises database that runs on an EC2 instance with no downtime. So I was hoping maybe if you wouldn't mind, we could relate this to a possible practical real-life example in regards to cloud practitioning and solutions architects. Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Rob. So DMS or database migration service is a very, very common tool for a lot of reasons or a lot of purposes. So for instance, we had a client or have a client that's got a production environment, and they wanted to run a BI tool in their QA environment or another account or a BI tool. So, one of the strategies would either be to make a snapshot, move it across, restore it, or you can set up some sort of database sync, or you can run DMS to simply have the data trickle through basically real time so that, they can basically see up to the minute stats through their BI tool, which is probably a much easier way than constantly doing backups and restores or trying to do other forms of things. It's also a very, very common tool to use if you're doing migrations from, like if the person's hosting at another service provider and you want to then set up and move the database once off, you can then use DMS to basically do what I call a trickle feed, but effectively it just means that it's constantly moving the data as it syncs. So it means if you get to then a point a week later or whenever when you want to do the actual live move over, the data's already there. It's been constantly fed by the user or the client's transactions over the last few days. So again, there's no downtime to do a snapshot, copy the database across, restore it, which can take hours depending on the size. So DMS basically allows you to do a live cutover with no downtime. So there's a range of practical uses for DMS in real world. Whereas, as I said, from our side, we use DMS quite often. So yeah, hope that helps.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I've been able to understand. Thank you so much.
Cool. Any other questions?
Thank you, Rehab. Thank you, Rehab, for that question. Quite a beautiful one, as well as we have Aaron Odeny. I saw your hand up. You can give us your question. Aaron, you're unmuted and you can carry on. Aaron Odeny, if you're having a problem, maybe you can put the question in the chat. I cannot hear you speak from my end.
While we're waiting for Aaron, Terence, I have got one or two questions from Janet. I can just pop in the chat and then just speak to. So let me just
sure. Carry on, Gareth.
I'll just pop it in the chat quick. So the question that Janet sent me from earlier was, do you have any cloud career mistakes you made and advice on how to avoid those mistakes? And what do you look for at the most when hiring a cloud personnel? So let's start with the first portion of the question. Cloud career mistakes, as I said, is more from my side, watching people do things where they don't feel passionate about. It's very hard to immerse yourself in a fast moving world like AWS with new services that come out regularly if it's not something that interests you. You don't want to find that what you've built today is this, or what you're using today is the same that was built 5 years ago, and it's kind of not been looked at. If you don't update the security, or you're not kind of looking at things, then it's more than likely not going to be as optimal as it could be. So from my side, the career mistake is probably not keeping up with the latest trends or advancements, and at least being aware of what is possible, even if you make a choice to not implement it for that workload or not, or that things, and also for yourself. You don't really want to be, as a solution architect, you study now, and in 5 years' time, you're still telling people or your clients the same thing that you've learned this year, when there might have been changes and improvements made that you're not aware of. So from my side, you want to keep up to date with things and stuff. And then just on the second part of that question about what do we look for when hiring a cloud personnel, sure. With pretty much purely remote working over the last few years, it definitely is an interesting question, and it definitely is always a bit more challenging trying to work remotely and see where people are, falling short or not kind of getting up to speed, because it's not like you can just sit at their desk and work with them and kind of, see where they are struggling. So I think from my side personally, couple of the things is obviously it depends on the role. Or what the minimum sort of requirements are. But I think the key thing is just people who are, as maybe James alluded to, a bit more creating a brand awareness, but it's people who are able to put up their hand when they get stuck. Particularly working remotely, you want to be able to work with people who don't need to be checked in. You know, nobody likes to micromanage other people, but you also need to know when people are getting stuck, and people need to have that confidence and ability to say, hey, Terence, I've done this, but I'm getting stuck with that. Can you give me 20 minutes this week and just kind of help me, go through this? You know, that's the sort of thing where, from my side, that's goes a long way to really kind of making sure that everybody's happy and feeling comfortable with what they're doing. I see there's some more questions coming through. Any experience on using Redshift and the cost implementation and probably any best practice? So yes, we have used Redshift. Redshift actually brought out a really nice tool or changed the console, I think, sometime last year or possibly even the end of the year before, where it's actually, you can put in more information about what you're looking to do and stuff, and it actually gives a recommendation around what size Redshift to go with and how many clusters. So there's a definite shift away from the DC2 towards the RA4X large and those sort of ones. But Redshift is a bit more of a complicated service, and you really kind of want to make sure that you're reading up a bit about it. It's using columnar indexing as opposed to normal row level. It does things slightly differently, and you want to make sure that you're understanding, is your data big enough to take advantage of it? How is it sharding the data? And a lot of those things. So as I said, Redshift is definitely what I would say is an advanced service, and do make sure that you don't make too many assumptions and you test your data on it and you kind of thing. So when we normally work with Redshift, we normally then will run our data on several sizes of Redshift to make sure and actually benchmark the results and then present them back to the client and get a good understanding of how that's working. Because again, you don't always know how it's going to work for that specific set of data and how good or bad or clean the data is and all those sort of things. So those will make a huge impact on what sort of Redshift it is, and therefore also the cost and stuff like that. And in terms of best practice, there's loads of things that you can read up around best practice in general for most of the services, as well as Redshift in particular. Hope that answers, Michael.
Yes.
Cool.
There is Aaron. He's been able to post his question on the chat. Yeah, I finished the cloud solution architect with Azubi, and looking at most job openings requiring cloud architects require one to have software knowledge and host of other skills, more so leaning towards DevOps. So is it important to have DevOps as a skill, or hiring managers don't understand the role of cloud solution architects?
Oh, Aaron, that is a darn fine question. In concept, I've seen a lot of bad job descriptions. I've seen a lot of job descriptions where they want the sun and the moon, and then they say minimum 1 year's experience, and you kind of like go, well, nobody with 1 year's experience is going to have half of what you're looking for. Or if they do, they're not going to be of any use because they're going to have touched all these services for like a month or two and not really have much depth and stuff. So from our side, we have separated teams for engineers and for our pre-sales and our solution architects. A lot of companies might not. So you might find that another company might have a person who deals with the client, does the solution architect and does the build out, in which case maybe having solution architect and DevOps is advantageous and required for the role. In our side, we recognize that a lot of the people who do DevOps come from developer backgrounds, and there might be other people that are better suited to doing Solution Architect Pro, in which case, developers might be more comfortable having somebody tell them what needs to be done and how it should be built out, and then they rather action it with the project manager. So it depends on the person, it depends on your skill set, and depends where you want to grow as a career. Do you want to be in DevOps? Do you want to be in Solution Architect? Do you want to be more rounded? Are you comfortable wearing all those hats? In which case, look for a job role that's offering the role that you're comfortable doing. Would be my advice. Don't try and do something that you're not comfortable with. If you're still at a stage where you're not really sure what you want to do, then go wild and take a chance and have a look. But yeah, in general, from my side, it shows when people have a passion about what they do and how far they want to research into things and that side of things. DevOps for me is an amazing course. If you guys do developer or stuff after Solution Architect, I strongly recommend just having a look through the coursework for DevOps. It's quite enlightening in terms of the concepts and what it's wanting to do and how you automate. Even if you don't ever go and write the exam, it really does kind of help you as a developer or builder. Just with a lot of the concepts and stuff.
Okay, we have Eva. Eva says, do you offer short-term internship programs, or does a bootcamp badge give an advantage to being hired?
That's another very good question, Eva. So we don't do short-term internship programs. We've kind of move towards hiring people with a certain amount of experience for a role. That's what makes James quite exceptional, is that we don't generally hire people like a James when we did a year ago. But in so doing, we probably need to relook at that. But yeah, it's because, yeah. So from just a normal perspective, it's often difficult to know what somebody's passion is or where they want to grow from that. But from our side, we don't have a dedicated intern program. That's why we do work with people like Azubi and Terence to kind of see that if we do have requirements, we can rather then see with that how that internship has looked and the candidates that Terence has worked with and stuff like that.
All right, we have an entrepreneur in the house. This is Ebenezer. Ebenezer says, what are the challenges you've encountered starting up Silicon Overdrive, and what would you do differently if you have to do it again as a solution architect?
That's a tricky one, Ebenezer. So as Silicon Overdrive, we've been going since 95. I've been there since 97. So, I've probably been there for longer than some of you might be alive. So yeah, in terms of then, going back, Amazon didn't even exist back then, just to put it in perspective, let alone AWS or their side and stuff. I think, there was Yahoo and one or two of those boys, but if we were to do it differently, there would be a lot of things we would do differently. Silicon Overdrive started as a software development company, and we grew into cloud and we grew into managed services and a lot of other aspects of IT as we basically didn't want to limit staff, and we wanted to keep growing skills and offering more services to clients to help them, manage their IT and infrastructure. And that's kind of where we've grown and positioned. If we were to do it again, hell, there's a lot of things we could do that would fast track or, save ourselves a lot of pain as you go. But also technology is different now to where it was 20 years ago and stuff like that, Ebenezer. So I think the key takeaway is, don't be scared to stop and take a breather at the end of a project or at the end of a things and say, guys, that didn't work optimally. What were the lessons learned? How do we kind of try and ensure that we don't repeat that? And again, it could be the same as if you didn't do well in a course or an exam or something. Look at it objectively and be honest with yourself and say, did I not actually study as much as I meant to? Did I focus on the wrong stuff? What should I have done better or differently? And that's a great skill to, be a bit introspective and kind of just understand what you could have done better.
All right, I think I'll take Pauline's question as second last and Ogunle's as last. So we take Pauline. For the people in the IT field, some of us feel anxious about the impact of AI, artificial intelligence tools like ChatGPT on our future careers. Any sentiments on that, Gareth?
It's a very interesting question. So I see that with some of my developers, where some of them are using it and checking their stuff. I actually watched a really nice video on a few days ago on an ex-Microsoft employee who was using ChatGPT with Excel, and he literally typed in what he wanted to do, and it gave him the function in Excel and gave him the macro that he could send it out. So it's a tool, but you still need somebody to be able to implement it. You know, I've seen people take blocks of code and put it into ChatGPT and say, why isn't this working? And it can tell them if there's a syntax or a spelling mistake. Again, as a developer, you should be able to figure that out yourself, but maybe you've spent 3-4 hours and you're just missing something, or, you know, again, it's a tool. It's a bit like going into your colleague and, you know, sitting at his desk and saying, you know, Terence, flip, dude, I've spent like half a day on this. This shouldn't have taken me an hour. Can you just spend 10 minutes? I'm sure I'm missing something stupid here. And ChatGPT can maybe help and stuff. I think, will it replace developers or will it replace things? No, not as things are at the moment. I think there's a lot of other AI tools and a lot of other things coming through. I think there might be a new generation of things coming through in the next year or two that might improve things. But again, most businesses are going to want to deal with a person and have them use a tool of like whatever, rather than them trust it. I mean, look at how long self-driving cars have been around. Are they all the rage in Nairobi? You know, no. So, you know, there's a point at which there's a level of technology adoption, and there's got to be a level of, you know, maturity and saturation in the market for it to get to that point. Whether ChatGPT is or not, who knows? Remember, ChatGPT only has 1 year's worth of data. So at some point it's going to get more outdated, or they've got to make changes or add more stuff in. And, you know, there's a lot of other considerations there.
Well, Pauline, take a glass of water, relax, and don't be afraid. You're not alone. I'm also in that club that fears when AI becomes sentient, when it can give reactions, human-like reactions. That really scares me to the core of my living. So, but on the other hand, where application and implication is concerned, we are very sure that ChatGPT might easily make, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and what they've done, the algorithms, will definitely be a game changer in the search engine field, where you see Microsoft is saying they're going to put the algorithms that OpenAI created into their browser. Whoa, Microsoft Edge might just bring the game on where Google search engine is concerned. I mean, now there's some competition. There definitely there's application and implication, but otherwise, relax. When the calculator came, people made as much noise as they are making about ChatGPT, but has the calculator, scientific calculator, replaced human beings? No. So you can also separate the noise and the hype. Then last but not least, I think we'll only sneak in perfect question as last, and then second last is Ogunleye. And then we will want to release our guests. So Ogunleye says, if applying for cloud solution architect and have the skills of cloud engineer, can I apply for the job using my cloud engineer resume? Does also that increase my chance of getting hired?
I would say absolutely. I mean, there's no ways I would ever disadvantage a cloud engineer from having additional certs or things like cloud architect. Cloud architect for me would indicate that a developer and engineer is more of an analytical thinker and can help advise the client if what they're trying to do is wrong. You know, I often see that developers will develop what the client asks them, but they don't actually think, does that actually what the client needs? You know, so somebody can come along and say, I want to do X, and you go, but why? And they'll say, but this is what I'm trying to do for my business. And then you go, but yeah, but what you're asking me for is going to do this, and I can do that for you, but that's not actually going to solve your problem. And in a month's time, you're going to realize you're going to need to change your request. So same with a cloud engineer. If you can then take the client's request and you can use a lot of the concepts from the solution architect, I can only see that making you a better engineer. So yeah, I certainly wouldn't think that would hinder you. It should definitely increase your chances.
Finally, I'll read a comment from Perfect. She has added on to the AI discussion, maybe not now, but very soon. How to use AI in order to be more productive may be a top requirement for jobs. So, Azubi family, thank you for making time. Thank you for coming onto the video bridge in record numbers. I mean, it has been real, folks. I've enjoyed this session, and we really want to thank Michelle and the Silicon Overdrive team working together with Selena and Janet from Azubi Africa for this wonderful and privileged position we were placed in to be, for Gareth to grace this inaugural talk, and we are looking forward to him meeting you guys at least once quarterly. This has been most interesting. On behalf of Azubi Africa, I'm immensely happy about this enduring partnership that we have had with Silicon for the past 1+ year. I don't really want to complete giving my vote of thanks, but there was a hand I saw up, and I think I've just forgotten the name. I would really like to give that person the opportunity to shoot the very last shot, the last bullet. There's somebody who had her hand up. There's somebody who just had her hand up, or that was
might have just been somebody clapping. I don't see any hands up on the list.
Okay. Okay. So yeah, Rehab, you have your hand up now.
Yes, actually, I would just like to give a vote of thanks on behalf of the Azubi program. You guys have really motivated us in terms of the future and the possibilities that we didn't even think were possible. So this is really kind of uplifting, and it just shows that for me personally that I'm on the right path. And I'm looking forward to be able to learn more about Silicon Overdrive in the future, and be able to hopefully find out ways I can be able to help the company and, just be able to learn and grow in my IT journey. Thank you guys a lot.
Sure, Rehab. And iron sharpens iron. That is an African proverb. I believe you're in the right place with the right people, the right mindset, and it's a different journey. It's a different journey from all of us. Some here come with even medical degrees. Others have come with a business background like you have. But it's a very interesting journey as we watch this cloud mushroom and burst out of proportion. And definitely there'll be a place for everybody. And there's various career paths that you as individuals can craft. And I think that's the biggest strength that Gareth has brought into this discussion. So over to you, Gareth, for your final parting shot.
No, thank you so much, Terence, for allowing James and myself to chat to your students, and I hope they found it inspiring and of use. So yeah, from my side, thanks very much.
You're most welcome, and we hope you will share with us the recording for especially those who may not have been able to make it onto the call. And we look forward to Janet, Selena, Michelle, as well as you, Gareth, arranging for another one. We, like Oliver,
look forward to it.
Some more, please.
Look forward to it, Terence.
Lovely. Good evening to all of you from Nairobi, Kenya. And till next time, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.